Hello, this is Stephen Hour, and yes, we are back with another Harry Potter movie review. And today, we'll be reviewing the second Harry Potter film, which is, of course, the 2002 The Chamber of Secrets. Now, like I said, this was the second Harry Potter film released, and before we get into the cast, before we get into the plot, before we get into my personal thoughts, let's get into a bit of backstory. Now, the first Harry Potter film, which we did, of course, in the series Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was released, and it was a huge hit. Audiences loved it, and it immediately showed that this was a huge franchise that was really going to really change and essentially revolutionize Hollywood. The director at the time, Christopher Columbus, was brought back to direct, and a lot of the cast from the previous film was brought back for this one, and of course it was adapting the second book. Again, the Harry Potter series, unlike the Bond films, adapts the book in order because they were adapting the story, which is very rare in film franchises for them to do that, as there's often a misrepresentation. Now, this film is even though like all Harry Potter films are great, they are loved by most fans and film goers alike. The second one is kind of a film. The second one is one that's really under the radar amongst most fans, as some like it, but some feel it's good, but it's not really up there at the top of when you're ranking all the films. And also sadly the actor who was playing Albus Dumbledore, Professor Dumbledore, Richard Harris, tragically passed away. So this would be the last time he would play Dumbledore in this film. And yeah, so that's really the kind of basic history we can get around this. And also, this would also be the last time Christopher Columbus would direct this film. I'll get more about to my personal thoughts, which would tie a bit more in the backstory, as I think that kind of collides within this review, and I think it'll be better explained there. But anyway, before we get into the plot and how I personally feel about this movie, let's hop straight into the cast. Now, the cast, like I said, all the main people from the previous film return. We had our main trio once again back: Daniel Radcliffe, Emma sorry, I have something stuck on my throat. Emma Watson and Rupert Grint as Harry, Hermione, and Ron, respectively. Interesting fact I find very much: these three, in my opinion, really came into their own in this film. How I associate with their characters throughout the film series really came from this one. And I'll explain a bit more about that, not just within the actual plot, but at the end of the thing. Again, we have other mainstays: Robbie Coltrane back as Rubius Hagrid, back. Professor Snape still being portrayed by the already great Alan Rickman. Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall. Like I said, Richard Harris as Dumbledore. Tragically, this will be the last time he would play the character, as he tragically passed away during filming, which is really sad. And despite what many people think, I consider him to be the definitive Dumbledore to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, his successors would make their own stamp on the character. But for me, when I think of Dumbledore, it is Richard Harris who comes to mind, not the other people who played it. Also, this film time around, we get some other characters, some who have become bigger in the franchise, but others really just stayed in this one film. We get the character of Lucius Malfoy, portrayed by Jason Isaac, who for me is just phenomenal in this role, and honestly just has this sort of intimidating stare, and even the way he says his lines, he has very little emotion in the way he says it in these early films. Again, the character would kind of change around the end of the film series, but here he is just a fierce and imposing presence that I think we don't get with any other in the franchise post this film. In the franchise, other villains, really, I think the really true main Harry Potter villain kind of came in this one. Again, I wouldn't say definitive Voldemort wouldn't come until later films in the franchise. But I think this was the closest we got to an actual imposing villain in the early two films. We also have, of course, Kenneth Bargan as Gildred Lockhart, who was the new Defense Against the Arts teacher after what happened to the first one, the Defense Against the Arts teacher in the previous film. He is, of course, brought in as the sort of replacement, and has a really interesting character that I'll get more into as we go on. Of course, we have some of our other people back. We have Dean Thomas, Seamus, Neville Longbottom, all portrayed by the same actors from the previous installment, and of course Ginny Weasley, portrayed by Bonnie Wright, gets a more active role in this film. And again, she was kind of like a little Easter egg you just saw in the first one, but here she would become pretty much a bigger role and presence in this film, and essentially would make a pretty big impact in this one than the films that kind of followed, as it wouldn't be until, I guess, a while before a character would really be mainstay or really be out there. But this is her first really big role, and interesting, we'll see where her character goes on from this one. We also get the introduction to a character that only popped up, sadly, twice within this film. Moaning Myrtle, portrayed by Shirley Henderson, and she's definitely a different character. I wouldn't say interesting, because I'm not really a fan of the Moaning Myrtle character. That's just me personally. But I can't deny that the character itself, is interesting. Is definitely a huge amongst fans. But for me personally, I wouldn't personally say that it is my personal favorite character. That is just my honest opinion, and I can't, I have to be honest. We also get Madame Pomfrey, the magical healer at Hogwarts. Again, I think reprise. I'm not sure if this was the first time she appeared. I think she might appear in the other one, but it might have been such a brief moment we did not really see her. But she appears here, and again, she plays a bit of a small role as the films go on. But she is, always just but she's just a character that's always nice to see, back every now and again. And it's just, always great to see. Other Hogwarts students return. We get Colin Creary, portrayed by Hugh Michel, probably butchering the actor's name. And essentially, it's a really minor role that he plays here, and he kind of continues throughout the rest of the book, but he only appears in just this one scene, and really doesn't come back for the remaining films. Also here, after this, we will not see this character again for quite some time, and that would be the character of Oliver Wood, portrayed by Sheen Bergstaff, the Quidditch player. He kind of never really came back after this film. I think he will get like a little cameo in the very last film in the franchise, but they're just, it's just faces that you just recognize. At least that's a face like you recognize from the first film. And I guess why? Because really, in honesty, he really doesn't play that much big of a role in the overall story. But it's a nice little note. This will be kind of the final time we will see these two particular characters. At least for one, we won't see, I don't think, for quite a long time, and the other one just kind of disappeared from the film franchise. Rounding out the remaining cast is, of course, the members of the Weasley family, of course. We got to see Molly Weasley in the first one, but here we actually get to see I really gotta take care of this throat. We get to see Mr. Weasley in this film, who is portrayed essentially Mr. Weasley, Arthur Weasley, portrayed by Mark Williams, who I just realized actually appeared in Doctor Who as Rory's father. Again, the rest of the Weasleys come back. Fred and George and Percy, still portrayed by the same actors. We also get to see, also the last time, of Nearly Headless Nick, betrayed still by the same actor, would not come back really for the rest of the film. We would also get we also would get Filch back, still portrayed by the same actor, David Bradley. We will also get Professor Sprout, who appears in this one, and then would come back for the final film. She was portrayed by Mariam Margolius. Probably butchering that name. She's the herbology professor and the head of Hufflepuff House. We also get the usual Slytherin, Draco Malfoy, still portrayed by Tom Felton, and of course Crabbe and Goyle, still portrayed by the same actors. We'd also get the Dursleys back, all three, people we just love to hate. More Hogwarts professors still here, and we also would get Cornelius Fudge, the the Minister for Magic, who makes his first appearance in this film. Is portrayed by Robert Hardy. And his character would definitely change as we go on. We also get the character of Tom Riddle, or Tom Marvolo Riddle, portrayed by Kristen Coulson, who we will find out is a very interesting character and find more about him as the film and as a integral part of the story. But I think one of my favourite characters to come from this film is, of course, Dobby the House Elf. Voiced, because this character is animated, voiced by Toby Jones, and even though he plays a big role in the story, he would appear in this film and wouldn't come back until the second last installment of the film. Anyway, I'm pretty sure all the cast out of the way. Let's hop into the review. We begin this film with the usual opening and of the title card, the music. And then we head to Harry Potter's room, where he is looking at photos, not from his school year from the previous year, but also photos of his parents. Again, this is the notebook that Hagrid gave him at the end of that film. But whilst that, his owl Hedwig is, making a racket because he wants to be let out of the cage. Harry says, be quiet, you're going to get me in trouble. And ironically, he does get in trouble as his uncle Vernon calls him down and tells him to shut up the bird. Now, we find out that we get a bit of an expedition dump. The Vernons are preparing for some kind of meeting with some kind of investors, I'm guessing, that could really help his career advance. And Harry has to stay out of sight, keep upstairs, and pretend he doesn't exist so he doesn't mess it up. And we also find out that Harry is no longer living downstairs, downstairs cupboard, but is actually living in his own room. And he is also, hasn't heard from his friends in months, as he's been sending letters and they haven't been writing back. So we get a little bit of understanding. Now, with that, Harry goes back up to his room, being told to, of course, and when he enters, he runs into Dobby the House Elf, who introduces himself. Harry's confused, asking, who he is, what's he doing here, and basically Dobby tells him that he must not come back to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this year, as something bad is going to happen. And for his sake, don't go. However, he presses on, but because Harry is a great person deep down, he can't. If someone's in trouble, or if something's that's going to affect the school, he has to stop it, or at least get somewhat involved in it, because that's what kind of person he is. But Dobby ends up making a racket, so Vernon comes up and tells him, to be quiet, and very much more threatening. Just as Vernon leaves, Harry then turns to Dobby, who was hiding in his closet, and tells him that, that he doesn't belong in the Muggle world. He belongs in the Wizard world. That is the place where he belongs, where he feels he has friends. And Dobby says, friends that don't write to you. And I like how Harry says, well, yeah, but wait a minute. How do you know my friends haven't been writing to me? It is then revealed that Dobby has been sabotaging these letters from getting to Harry, thinking that his friends didn't want him, that he would no longer go back to, that he wouldn't want to go back to school. This then gets Harry very upset, because these are his friends. He wants to get in contact with them and, just understand what they've been doing. And he chases Dobby down the stairs, and Dobby uses magic to lift the cake that Petunia had made and dump it on these guests. Now, Vernon didn't see Dobby, or the rest of the Dursleys didn't see Dobby, and actually assumed it was Harry. Dobby then disappears. Vernon, but I like how Dobby says this is for Harry's own good. Again, Vernon doesn't see Dobby, and basically for his own good. And essentially, Harry is in trouble for something he didn't do. He's then locked in his room with bars on his windows, basically, you know, preventing him from going back to that school of wizardry, or witchcraft and wizardry, and he was never going to see those friends of his again. Really, the Dursleys are really just cruel and vile people. And it is just horrible for what they've done to Harry, not just here, but we also get on the sense they've done probably far worse stuff to him in the past, all because of him having magic, clearly showing that these two are very prejudiced, very close-minded, and overall just terrible, terrible human beings. Later that night, while Harry is pretty much looking lone and kind of depressed, we get some kind of weird light in the sky. It is then revealed to be some kind of flying car that comes up to the window, and it's revealed to be Ron, Fred, and George, who have found out what's happened to Harry and plan to rescue him. And the rescue goes pretty well for the most part, except it ends up waking up the Dursleys, and they try to prevent Harry from leaving, but they manage to escape with Vernon falling out the window and landing in, I guess, essentially a bush, and watches the car fly away. Just as the car flies away, Ron turns to Harry and tells him happy birthday. And we then end up at the Burrow, essentially the Weasley house. They enter in, and we find how, even though it's a little bit, and Ron says, it's not much, but it is home. And Harry says, well, I think it's brilliant. Clearly seeing that Harry doesn't, you know, like, doesn't mind that clearly the Weasleys are poor, which is clearly shown. They're not the wealthiest, and their house is definitely, well, it's very, very different. But he doesn't care, because for him, this is more of an experience for him. And of course, we then get a scene-stealing moment with Mrs. Weasley coming down the stairs and pretty much scolding out the three boys for taking the car without notice. Not only could they have died, not only could they have been seen, but they could have gotten Harry, you know, hurt. However, they said, but they were starving Harry to put bars on his windows. They had no choice. And Molly begins to calm down a bit, even though she does threaten to put bars on Ron's window. You know, immediately switches and welcomes Harry in for a spot of breakfast. It's clear that even though Harry is not related to the Weasleys, he, in many ways, is accepted amongst the Weasleys as, you know, a member of the family, because he views Ron as his best friend in the whole world, and eventually views them almost as not just family, but I guess the rest as brothers, with, I guess, Ron being his favorite brother of the whole bunch. We also get see Ginny, who comes downstairs and runs back upstairs the moment she sees Harry. It's clear that Ginny might have a crush on Harry. And Ron and Harry kind of doesn't mind it, but doesn't really know about the crush and everything. So it's really interesting how, and basically Ron's saying that she's been talking about him all summer, and it's getting a little bit annoying. We then see Arthur Weasley turn up from work, sits at the table, and basically you have this nice little family camaraderie. Something I think that was definitely what Harry liked about the Weasleys, because we feel he never got that back home with his home life, with his parents are dead and his aunt and uncle not really treating him right. As he sits down, he turns and asks who's this guy sitting at the table, and it reveals to be Harry Potter, and of course Arthur is stunned. Again, from the previous film, Harry is a huge name in the wizarding world, but he doesn't boast it, he doesn't show it or take advantage of how huge name he is. Again, he's just a normal kid who just happened to be in these circumstances. And essentially, Arthur, just like Molly, kind of welcomes him into the family, and they just have a nice little, you know, dinner and talk. And of course, we also get a owl who delivers some letters with basically they stuff they need for the school year. And surprisingly, Harry's is also on the list. And I like how Arthur says, Dumbledore must know you're here, Harry. That old man doesn't miss a trick. It's clear that everyone in the Weasley house respects Dumbledore quite a lot, and they realize that, however, despite they're poor, it's going to be quite a lot of money to get their supplies for this year, but Molly says, we'll manage like always. They then have to go to Diagon Alley to get this stuff, and they take this chimney route, which I was always loved as a kid, and always found it interesting. It's in Harry's turn to say, basically, step on the chimney, you get this magic dust, and you shout Diagon Alley, and it takes you to wherever you need to go. Harry says it, And he ends up saying Darganilly and ends up in a horrible place. Now, should we know there's a special deleted scene. As soon as he ends up in this horrible place, Darganilly, we end up seeing Lucius and Draco, and we get a little insight to why Draco ended up the way he is, with no doubt how strict his father's home life would have been. But, you know, we never really... But, of course, that is deleted from the film. And even though I wouldn't mind seeing it, I could get it because, honestly, so far this film has been really good pace so far. Of course, we are back, and however, as Harry exits the building, he runs into Hagrid, who saves him from all the witches and wizards, who honestly are very scrupulous people, and ends up taking him to the bookshop, where not only they run happen into Hermione, who then uses a magic spell to fix up his glasses. Now, there's a problem that people point out. Underage wizards are not meant to use magic, but Hermione did. The way to fix this would have been maybe how he runs into not just Hermione, but another grown wizard who happens to be, I don't know, like a character that become very important in the franchise, and would have fixed the glasses. That way you could avoid the underage magic law, and it would have just made a bit more sense, but hey, that's just me. Something that also Hermione did also in the first film. I'm not sure if this was a callback or anything, but I think it might have been. Anyway, we get into the bookstore and we find Lockhart, who happens to be this renowned wizard and author and very much thinks a lot of himself. We find that Mrs. Molly is a little bit attracted to him because he's this big novelist, big author, and loves having his name in the picture. And of course, as soon as he sees Harry, he wants to take a photo with Harry because Harry, again, is such a big name within the wizarding world. Again, Harry didn't want this. He was born into it, but he doesn't, you know, vote or show about it. Just as that whole thing's going on, essentially the Weasleys are kind of about to walk out, with the exception of Molly Weasley, because she wants to get the book signed by the author. Of course she does. Just as they're on their way out, they run into Draco, who of course is mad how Harry can't go anywhere without getting his picture taken. And just as Ginny goes to defend him, he says the line, "Oh, look, Harry, you got a girlfriend." And I like how I was watching this with a friend, and the friend said, "Oh, trust me, she won't be his girlfriend for at least a few more films." And I just cracked up laughing, because again, when you revisit this, you know where these characters are kind of, you're seeing again, the important about these films is the character's story in the long run. But here, Harry finally meets Lucius, Draco's father, face to face, almost intimidating and wanting to see his scar. We also find out that Harry is not afraid to say Voldemort's name, like most witches and wizards. And even though how people view Voldemort, even though he's evil, he did great things, he said he's nothing more than a coward and a murderer. And I like how Hermione immediately supports this. Lucius then turns to Draco and says, "Is this Hermione?" And then we look at Hermione's parents in the background, who happens to be talking to the Weasleys, and talking to members of the Weasleys. And just as all the Weasleys are about to make their way out, we kind of get this little hint of confrontation between Arthur Weasley and Lucius Weasley. Clearly that both work at the same, are both involved in the ministry. However, Arthur Weasley doesn't get paid that much and has to resort to second-hand books. And I like how Lucius, if you miss it, Lucius grabs the books but puts it back. But you notice there's an extra book being placed back, something that will play a bit of a role later in the film. And we like how the idea that both view of themselves, they're both wizards, but they both view themselves as both being disgrace to the name wizard, because each have a different ideology. Again, more interesting stories are going to be popping up here, which I find really interesting. A bit foreshadowing that asked me a bit of a mystery as a kid. I'm wondering what the hell's going on, and thank God I was going to get my asses in this film. We then go back to the usual platform 9 3/4, where everyone is trying to get on the Hogwarts Express. Everyone gets on board except for Ron and Harry, who for some reason, some kind of spell prevents them from going essentially through the brick wall, and realize they've missed the train. They realize their only course is to wait by the car, but Ron says, "Wait, the car?" And immediately, I like how Ron came up with the idea, and Harry immediately supported it. They decided to take the flying car to Hogwarts. However, Harry points out that most muggles are not accustomed to flying cars or seeing flying cars, so Ron turns it invisible. We then get the scene of essentially them finally catching up at the special train tracks to catch up with the train, and the invisibility cloak immediately failed, and they're hearing the train thinking they must be getting close. I like how Harry immediately hold on, wait a minute, looks at Ron, and Ron gives the best emotion expression. One thing I think I love about this film again, all the characters came into their own, how they sounded a bit more natural, less childlike actors, and I think one of the best that came into their own, I think the best would probably be, for me, Rupert Grint, probably butchering that name, but basically he's a bit of the comedic relief of the group and has a bit more facial expressions. But we also see throughout the film he has spine. He has spine. He's ready to defend his friends. True, he can be a bit of a scaredy cat sometimes, but that immediately goes away when it means helping his friends. Something that I think would kind of get lost on in future films, and I will get to that in later film installments. Anyway, they then notice that the train is behind them, and the car ends up flying off the bridge, essentially what they were on, up into the air, and Harry kind of almost falls out of the car with holding onto the door, and is quickly back in. I like how there's a bit of comedic moments where he's saying, "I'm trying, your hand's all slippery," when Ron's trying to grab his hand, and as soon as he gets back in the car, Harry goes, "Well, I think we found the train." I like just the comedic moment here. It's suspenseful, it is action-packed, heart-racing, but they have comedic moments that don't overtake the scene. And then, of course, we then cut to the flying car getting closer to Hogwarts, but then the car starts acting up, and they end up crashing into the willow tree. And the willow tree starts, bashing the car, Ron's wand is broken, and the car ends up falling on the ground, but quickly manages to drive away before the tree can further crash him. However, the car ends up ejecting Ron, Harry, and all their stuff out of the car and drives off. Ron and Harry try to get the car, but they watch it drive into the Forbidden Forest, and Ron says, "Mum is going to kill me." They then bring their stuff up to where all the other student stuff is, and Harry notes off a house elf, basically saying that, trying to tell them not to go to school. They miss the train, the car crashes. Clearly, someone does not want him to be here this year. This is way too coincidental. They run into, of course, the caretaker, Filch, who tells them to take a good look. This could be the last time they might step foot in these halls. Of course, they then get sent to Snape, who scolds them, because now there's huge publicity of the car flying. And he says if they were in Slytherin, he would have them on the train home tonight, being expelled. But Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore, said luckily they are not. They're just given very highest attention, and their parents and guardians will be notified. They are safe, but I don't think Ron looks all that happy. We get a few interesting scenes here that follow afterwards. We get this herbology scene where they're in class with the herbology Professor Sprout, who, how they are, having these, creatures, I believe, are called, basically these creatures are mandrakes, and they make this loud noise, but because they're babies, that makes them unconscious, but adult, apparently, it has the ability to kill, and when they have to have these protective earmuffs, it's a scene. Now, I like it because it really, something I think this film does, we really get the idea that we are at Hogwarts with actual classes, something I felt that was kind of missed in later films. And yeah, again, I'll probably explain a bit more about this film, my feelings at the end, but that's just something I really liked. We then get the scene of them in the Great Hall, and Ron gets a howler, basically this letter that comes to life and screams, hence howler, and basically getting mad at Ron for getting into trouble with the car, and how Dad's, getting the real hot seat at work, and say they do something like this, he's coming straight home. Then it turns around and says, "Congratulations, Ginny, of getting into Gryffindor. Mum and Dad are very proud of you," and then tears itself apart. Interesting how Molly Weasley's voice in that one scene steals the show. And it really made me realize, maybe getting detention cards or, letters from the teachers saying, that you'll go into trouble is not that bad comparing to that. So I'm glad that doesn't exist in real life. Something I was very happy that, that some things only exist in the movies and not in real life. We also get a scene with Gridrick Lockhart, who is, again, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, trying to teach the kids, because now the kids you know, school stuff. And we get, his class is where we get, basically teaching a class about Cornus Pixies, basically little creatures. The class doesn't take it seriously until he opens the cage and starts causing havoc. Lockhart is also proved to not be quite a good teacher as he tries to stop it, but ends up with his spells not working, and it's lucky that Hermione's spell worked just in time that causes them to freeze. We also get the scene where really how Neville becomes a kind of the butt of the joke. He ends up being put on the chandelier, and I like how he says, "Why does this always happen to me?" I found it to be a very funny scene and a pretty good one nonetheless. Okay, now some of these three scenes are jumbled about and played really at different orders throughout the film, but they kind of take place around the same kind of time-ish, and really just helps progress the story. We also get a scene where Harry is in detention, of course he is, and he's missing out on, you know, his lunch, dinner, and he's with Lockhart. We notice that not just with his class scene, but the detention scene, Lockhart really thinks of himself, and honestly, from what I've been told, he plays the character really well by most hardcore fans, and really like the actor portraying the character. Harry then says he's hearing voices. Lockhart says, "What are you talking about? I can't hear any voices." He says, "Can't you?" No? And then he says, "Well, look, you might be tired. Just go lie down. Just have a rest. All will be better. You know, because you've been out for too long. You need to get back before you get into trouble." He then leaves, but he still hears a voice. He then runs into the corridor where not there's water anywhere. A little bit that helps throughout the film, but we get a message on the wall, and Finch's cat being strung up and petrified, basically saying, and the message on the wall basically saying the Chamber of Secrets is open. Both students and teachers come in seeing this, and we find that there's a bit more to the story here than what we are seeing. And also, there's another scene that kind of happened before this. I'll come back to it, but just maybe before I can fully explain this scene, we see that whilst he's there, we find the cat that was petrified Filch. He's mad at Harry, thinking that these three would have done it. However, Harry is disproven both not just by Lockhart, who's saying, "Hey, Harry was with me all the time, and I just let him go," so he could have just easily stumbled onto this. And ironically, for a moment, Snape actually was again helped support Harry, saying, "Well, it could be possible. However, it is very suspicious." And just as when Harry says, "Well, he heard voices before he came in," Hermione stops him, and Dumbledore basically tells the students to go and saying that the cat will be able to be cured as she is not dead, she's merely petrified. And like Lockhart says, "Oh, that's a shame, because I would have a spell just for this," clearly thinking too much of himself, but Dumbledore looks a bit suspicious with the guy, and we'll find a bit more about why at the end of the video. End of the plot. And just as all the students are told to go, Hermione takes Harry and Ron, and tells Harry to not have said that, because even by wizard standards, hearing voices, even that would raise a few red flags. And I like how the picture agrees with Hermione, and then walking away. Now there's a few scenes. Now there's a scene that I kind of skipped. I need to go back to, and that is when the Gryffindor Quidditch team about to go for practice, they run into Slytherin team, and they've been told to give the field to the Slytherin team so they can trade their new Seeker, and the Seeker just happens to be Draco Malfoy. It turns out he got on the team because his father gave everyone on Slytherin the fanciest broom, a gift from Draco's father. Ron and Hermione were just in the area, and can't believe this. And I like how Hermione says one thing, and it really just shows really how he says, that really cuts into Draco a bit, how he's saying that no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in. Every member that stands before them got in on pure talent alone. Draco, clearly upset by this, calls her a filthy little mugblot. Everyone in Gryffindor is shocked and taken back by this, whilst everyone in Slytherin ain't. Ron, mad and defending Hermione. Again, something I liked about Ron's character, out of all the three, I'd say he's the most loyal. And honestly, when it comes to a fight, even though he could run away, but when one of his friends is hurt, he stands up and gets out his wand that is broken and tells Draco to eat slugs. The spell backfires and he ends up vomiting slugs. And of course, Harry and Hermione end up taking him to Hagrid just for some help, and I like how all the Slytherins are laughing, really just showing just how despicable they are, while the Gryffindors just looked concerned. And again, when this happened to Ron getting kind of knocked out by his own spell, both Hermione, Harry, and of course Ron's twin brothers, who have, older brothers who are both twins, happen to be on the Gryffindor team, came to his aid and again tried to help him. We get to Hagrid, we get a bit of interesting exposition dump that not only gives us context to the rest of the film, but also for the rest of the series in general, where Harry is surprised by, what happened, but he doesn't know what the term mudblood is. Hermione reveals everything, how she is a mudblood. A mudblood is essentially a witch or wizard born into essentially a family with non-magical parents. Essentially, she is what is known as Muggle-born. And we find that each character, the main trio, come from a certain wizarding parentage. Ron comes from a pureblood family, but they don't act like purebloods who feel them superior above everyone else. Harry comes from a half-blood family, with his mother being kind of from a half-blood family, because his mother, even though is a witch, came from a non-magical parent, so he is technically a half-blood by default, while his father is a pure half-blood, is a pureblood. And then there's Hermione, coming from neither. Hagrid then points out to Harry that there's some witches and wizards, like the Malfoys, who view themselves superior because they are what they are called pureblood. And there are some who feels that only magic should only be taught to those who come from pure magical parents, which very much upsets Harry, and for me was the first insight to, I guess, racism in a kid's film, which, again, this will play a bit of a role in the story. Anyway, let's get back to a bit more on track with the events in the actual film, as I've jumbled a few scenes up together. We then get back and we find out how on the wall, something was written about the Chamber of Secrets, and Hermione asks McGonagall, what is the Chamber of Secrets? And she reveals a bit about Hogwarts history. And that is, when it was founded, the founders of the school were Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Salazar, Slytherin, 4 of the most magical witches and wizards of the ages. Now, the history then goes that out of all the 4, 3 got along quite well, harmoniously, with regardless of students to be admitted, but the other one needed to be more selective, and that, of course, was Slytherin. Now, Slytherin believed that only magic should be given or taught to those who were purebloods, and he was unable to sway the others for his beliefs. He is then essentially shooed off. He then left, really. But before he did, he left behind a sort of, a secret chamber, which would unleash a monster that would wipe out all Muggle-borns from the school. And in Slytherin's eyes, those were the students that were unworthy to study magic. However, no one has ever found the chamber, and the chamber was called the Chamber of Secrets, and is said to only be opened up by those who were heir to Slytherins. And they've searched the chamber, it's never been found, but it says the chamber lies where a monster lies within. That's it. And of course, the trio are naturally on this, and realize that they have to stop this before it gets way out of hand. They then realize that the most prime suspect is Draco. His family has been in Slytherins for decades, and it could be the logical explanation. And it definitely does seem to point to Draco. Draco does no favors by essentially clearly being, against mudbloods and purely being a racist, a bully asshole. Realizing that to do this, they need to come with a special potion that will take quite a while to make. But Harry is now worried because half the school could be petrified by them, but it's their only option. But they're going to go to the Quidditch game, which in my opinion is, I think, the best Quidditch game of the entire series. These CGI effects are not that dated and look far better than I think anything else from the previous one. And it's definitely, I think, one of my more interesting game being played, with Slytherin in the lead. And we also find that one of the big dodger balls that are chasing Harry has been jinxed, but but no one's really picking up on it and stopping it from hurting Harry. Harry then gets into a chase between him and Draco, who are after the snitch. It's a really fun, very energetic, and very, upbeating moment. Eventually, it causes Draco to eventually lose control of his broom and ends up, getting knocked out and unconscious. And Harry quickly gets the snitch, ends up winning the game. But the dodger ball still is after Harry, and Hermione saves him at the last minute by causing the ball to explode. Lockhart then comes to try and heal Harry's hand. That seems to be hurt, but it ends up, having no bone in his arm at all, and now becoming very flexible. He's then sent to the nurse's office, nurse's corridor, I would really say, where Draco happens to be there, pretty much badly hurt, and is given this special drink to take that will help him grow his hand back. It doesn't taste good, but what are you expecting? Pumpkin juice? Throughout the night, he's just there until he then gets a visit by Dobby, who's revealed he was responsible for basically every bad thing that's happened to Harry. Both, not everything, but the Quidditch Game incident, the station incident, and it's revealed why, because he doesn't want Harry to be here, and how the Chamber of Secrets has been opened before, and Harry is going to get hurt. He's like, wait, before? And Dobby quickly goes away even when Harry's asking who is opening the chamber, but he disappears. We then find out that one of the students, the one I mentioned, one that only appears for this film early in the casting, has been petrified. They tried to look at his camera to see if he caught a photo, but it didn't produce anything, and then it's revealed that Dumbledore's fears have been realized. The chamber has indeed been opened again. The trio are then shocked. It's been opened before, and they happen to be in the girls' toilets making this potion, where they run into Moaning Myrtle, who definitely can definitely be dramatic, to say the least. We then get this famous dueling scene, while teaching them essentially how to duel the spell Expelliarmus, which is essentially a wizard's bread and butter basic spell to use to defend them or disarm people in, combat. First round was between Lockhart and Snape, where Lockhart gets unconscious. Then it becomes between Harry and Draco, and it kind of goes back and forth until Draco ends up unleashing a spell that turns where a snake comes out and tries to attack students, but Harry stops it by talking to him in a strange accent. And this strange language, which shocks everyone, or actually scares everyone, but Snape comes to the last minute, just making the snake completely disappear. The students are kind of surprised, and one says, "What the hell was that, Harry?" Harry doesn't know what's everyone talking about, and then eventually Ron and Hermione take him away and explain to him that what he did was Parseltongue, a very rare gift. It basically is the ability to speak to snakes. Again, speaking to why the snake understood Harry in the first film, and it's also revealed that there's a reason why the Slytherin house, why their mascot is a snake, because he was a Parseltongue. Now, with everything going on, they point out that people could be worried that Harry could be the heir to Slytherin, which scares Harry. We also see how he's becoming a bit more alienated by a lot of people in the school, and that really does affect Harry quite a bit. He then goes to Dumbledore's office, where he goes to meet Dumbledore. He meets this phoenix bird that explodes into fire and then is reborn from the ashes. And just when another, petrified thing has occurred, Harry is kind of in trouble for it. And Filch again takes him to Dumbledore's office. However, he is cleared by Hagrid, who takes him away. And as Harry leaves the office, he then ends up going back to the girls' lavatory and retrieves an old book. We also find out that, also in the scene, Harry is wondering, was it the right choice for him to be put into Gryffindor, as the hat still thinks he would have been perfect for Slytherin. But I like how Harry is kind of wondering, did the hat make the right choice, and should he be in Slytherin? A little thing that you kind of pick up and really just shows that Harry's character slightly getting more insight to this time around. Anyway, he takes the book back to his dorm, and begins to write into it, and suddenly the book begins to communicate with him and then shows him a flashback where it's revealed to be in the past where the first murder occurred. The chamber secret was open. We then see how a kid by the name of Tom Marvolo Riddle, who happens to have owned the diary, and talks to Dumbledore and asks about the event and how the school could be closed because of this killing. And this was a young Dumbledore when he was kind of a professor, not the headmaster. He then, realizing that, in order to, to save the school, they have to find the person responsible for this. So he then goes to Hagrid, where it reveals to be keeping a monster that's been responsible for these incidences. Or for the incident. And it says how, Hagrid, you'll have your wand for this. They tried to kill the beast, but the responsible, but it ends up running away. Harry is then forced out of the flashback, and then explains to Ron and Hermione about the whole thing. And he can't believe that Hagrid might have a role in all this. They end up going into Hagrid Returns, who gives them an update on how the cure is going, so they can get everyone unpetrified immediately. They end up walking away, but he then tells them, to be careful about what's going on. We end up having Neville run and basically tell the gang that someone's broken into the corridor, and the place is a mess, and Harry realizes that the book is missing, but they don't get it. Only a Gryffindor can make their way into the common room. No one else can. What's going on? We then find the scene where they're about to go for another Quidditch game. However, it is then cancelled, and they're taken back to the common room, and basically new strict rules are now in place, where students cannot leave without being guided by a teacher, no exception. Unless the culprit to this mess is found, the school will be closed. And what is even worse, Harry and Hermione then find out after when they got taken away from the Quidditch game, Harry got taken away from the Quidditch game, and is reunited with Ron, they find out Hermione has been petrified. And they are both scared and angry, and rightfully so. They're scared, concerned, and angry because now their friend is in this state, and now they really have to find out, what's going on. Realizing that now their only really lead now is Hagrid, they have to at least find out what's going on. He may give them a lead, or better yet, how to open the chamber, and that's their best move. But Ron says, but you heard what McGonagall said, no students are allowed to leave except for class. Realizing their only course now is to go and get the old invisible cloak out again. One of the very few, and they then go to Hagrid's hut, where they then ask about chamber secrets and what is going on. And Hagrid is just about to tell them something, but then another knocks at the door, and the two quickly get back under the invisibility cloak. And then we have Dumbledore and the Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, come in, and Fudge is here to take Hagrid in, courtesy of this happened. Last time this happened, Hagrid was believed to have been the guilty party. It's happening again. He has to be taken in, and that record is against him. Even though Dumbledore defends Hagrid, saying, no, this is impossible, but he's told but he has no choice but to take him in to Azkaban prison. A name drop that will become synonymous in the later films. We also see Lucius Malfoy turn up at the hut, who turns out that Dumbledore has been sacked as the headmaster of the school, and realizing with Dumbledore gone, that the kids won't begin petrified, there could be killings next, that the Muggleborns won't stand a chance. And I like how clearly Lucius tries to, with his words, basically saying he genuinely cares about, the Muggleborns, but it's clear that he doesn't. Just as they leave, we get a little hint that Dumbledore knows that Ron and Harry are in Hagrid's shack, and just as Hagrid leaves, he says, when you're in trouble, follow the spiders. Everyone leaves. Harry and Ron then listen to what Hagrid has to heart and follow the spiders into the Forbidden Forest, into a forbidden place where they see a giant spider, who happens to be the animal in the flashback, and they ask him questions about the Chamber of Secrets. Hagrid is being said to be found guilty for the original, and basically asking for help. He says Hagrid had nothing to do with it, I had nothing to do with it, and they ask, well, who did it? And he says, we do not speak of it. This was a creature that was born in the castle. I came here in the pocket of a traveller. And I like how the biggest clue is that these spiders, they fear this thing. So that gives them a bit of a clue, and when they start to look around, spiders are everywhere. I tell you, as a kid, I was creeped out with seeing all these spiders. They creeped the hell out of me. Now, it turns out this giant spider has control of the rest when Hagrid's around. But they are hungry, and he can't, turn them away. So what ends up happening is Ron, Harry, and the dog that have, Hagrid's dog, who happens to follow him with them, are now kind of cornered with the spiders everywhere, and they're saved at the last minute by the flying car from earlier in the film, who comes back and saves the three and gets them out of the forest. It's a fun, energetic scene, almost horror-like, and it feels so action-packed. And I like how the CGI here is not that dated, and there's a lot of practical effects used, which I really like. Eventually, they quickly get out of the forest as quickly as they can, and they're back at Hagrid's shack. And I like how Ron says if he ever meets up with Hagrid, he'll kill him, and then the car goes back into the forest. Well, it says, but what was the point? Well, Harry says, well, easy. We know that Hagrid is now innocent. They then go back to the castle where they are where Harry and Ron are visiting Hermione still in the infirmary, and as they notice there's something under Hermione's hand, in Hermione's hands, to take it out, and it's a piece of paper. They find out the answer to everything. That the snake, the basilisk, is that the creature is a basilisk, a giant snake, which explains why Harry can hear the voices. It's a snake. He speaks parcel tongue. But then there's another thing. It kills people by staring them in the eye. How come no one's dead? And another clue that is found, because no one looked him directly in the eye. Think about it. Water, they saw it out of the water reflection from the first case. The ghost of Sir Headless Nick, well, he can't be killed again. The student with the camera. And Hermione, he found out by using the mirror to look around corners for the thing, and saw it through the reflection of the mirror. Therefore, she survived. She, didn't die, but was petrified. It all fits, and it's been but then Ron poses another question. How is it getting around? And they find that Hermione's given them the answer, as is written on the paper, the pipes. Plus, there's another thing. Spiders flee before it. It all fits. And another thing that Harry just realized. Remember the student that died years ago in a bathroom? What if it never left? Moaning Myrtle. They realized that the Moaning Myrtle was the Muggle-born that was killed in the bathroom. We then get a loudspeaker that's saying that, teachers have to meet them at this floor, and their worst fears realize one of the students has been taken into the chamber. Lockhart turns up casually, and as they reveal that student's been taken into the chamber, they says, well, because of his legendary prowess, he could go in and rescue the child, and he agrees to. Clearly nervous, but he says he'll be getting ready, and he leaves. And just as they ask which student's been taken in, and Ron and Harry are overhearing this, they are shocked and horrified. Well, Ron is horrified when he hears that it's Ginny. His sister has been taken into the chamber. And McGonagall realizes the school now has to be closed. Realizing everything, that no, this is not going to happen, they end up going to Lockhart for information to get him to the chamber. Despite being useless, he could help. As soon as they find out he's packing, but not to go down to the chamber, but to run away. They then find out all this time Lockhart was nothing more than a fraud. He's been taking credit for what other witches and wizards have done, writing books about it, taking the credit, but also using memory charms to erase the memory of them adventures. That way they could not go blabbering about what they've seen, and that way he would not be able to sell another book. Just as he's about to wipe both Ron and Harry's memory, they then force him to drop his wand at one point and take him to the girls' bathroom, where they reveal the hidden passage within the girls' toilets, and about to go down into the place to go, and rescue Ginny. Lockhart is pushed down first, and the other two follow. As they get down there, they find that there's bones everywhere. There's this giant snake skin. It's a really creepy and ghastly scene, and I really like about it that much. Lockhart pretends to, faint out of cowardice, but he quickly gets back up and steals Ron's wand and prepares to wipe their memory and write a different story. Just as he's about to, Ron's wand, like we saw early in the film, backfires and ends up erasing his mind. mind and causing a cave-in. He forgot everything. Lockhart forgotten everything that happened, but Ron can't go forward because he is trapped behind. But Harry realizes he has to go forward. He then goes forwards and opens the chamber and goes inside, where he finds Ginny unconscious and knocked out. Then Tom Riddle comes in, shocked, realizing that it's just, but he's saying, but he's kind of like a memory, a ghost. Because of this, he can exist within here, and Harry is realizing that Tom is somehow behind this, along with Ginny. Tom has somehow manipulated Ginny through this book, but he's wondering, why is Tom doing all this? What's his game? But more importantly, why has he clearly has a fixation on Harry? He says, well, he used to have this name, Tom Marvolo Riddle. His was his father's name, who happened to be a muggle. He then changed it to something that all witches and wizards would one day fear. He then reveals his name. Tom Marvolo Riddle is an acronym, or an anagram, for the name, I am Lord Voldemort. That was a big shock for me, and I like how, it was so well built up. It was not too obvious, but there were kind of little subtle clues that Tom may not be on the up and up. And I like how it was a subtle build-up. And it's revealed that what he plans to do is essentially use Ginny's strength to come back to life and, continue his work. Just as that's about to happen, Harry says, well, he hasn't won this time. Dumbledore will be back, and he will never be gone, not as long as people are loyal to him. Then the hawk, the phoenix bird, comes down and delivers a hat, the sorting hat, which reveals to be a sort of sword, but Harry doesn't find that till later, and Tom reveals the giant snake and that snake goes to attack Harry. The hawk manages to blind the basilisk's eyes, and Harry quickly gets the Gryffindor sword and uses it to stab the snake, the basilisk, but it also ends up harming him. As it turns out, it is quite venomous. And I love the action-packed scene. It's so great. It's so suspenseful, especially when Harry is trying to hide from it. I'm on the edge of my seat to see how he's going to get out of it. And the special effects for the snake is used quite remarkably well. He manages to then quickly get one of the basilisk's tooth as they get closer to the diary. Tom says, well, the thing will kill him out of hours, and everything will be for nothing. He then uses the tooth to then stab into the diary, which leaks some kind of black substance, and just kept stabbing it until Tom Riddle is essentially gone, dies, and is destroyed. Ginny wakes up, realizing what she's done, but Harry says it's not her fault. And just as Harry's kind of accepting that he's pretty much going to die, the hawk comes back and ends up tears into the wound, which ends up healing and saving Harry. Something that I like how Dumbledore said what it has the ability to do. The hawk then gets Ginny, Harry, Ron, and Lockhart out of the cave, and Harry and Ron are in front of Dumbledore. He kind of scolds them for a bit for getting into trouble, but then congratulates them on a good job and says how they're going to get certificates and rewards for all the things that they've done throughout the school, for the service of the school. He then gives Ron a piece of paper to go to essentially Azkaban to free Hagrid right now. Just as he leaves, he then goes to Hagrid. Then tells him a few things, how he could speak Parseltongue, and his, how he feels that, he and Voldemort would have some kind of connection. He says, well, it's probably because of that night when he gave you that scar. A bit of Voldemort went into him. And true, he does share a lot of traits of Voldemort, but what makes him different are his choices. He chose to be in Gryffindor, and that's why he is a Gryffindor. And also the sword can only be wielded by those who are a true Gryffindor. Therefore, he says straight out that he showed him true loyalty down in the cave, and that's why it was sent to him. We then see Lucius come in, who is angry how Dumbledore, was reinstated back as headmaster, and how basically he says how those governors said that that Lucius threatened to harm their families if he wasn't expelled. He says, no, that did not happen. And he asked, basically about the whole situation of the Chamber of Secrets, who was responsible. And he says it was Voldemort, though he was using a proxy this time through this diary. And I like how Lucius then turns to Harry and says, well, better hope that Harry is always here around to save the day. And according to behind the scenes, Radcliffe at the improvised the line saying, don't worry, I will be. And the Lucius's actor was so impressed. He says, this is not just a kid. This is a child actor now, and a really damn good one. We then see the scene of Lucius is leaving, and we find out that Dumbledore is, that Lucius is Dobby's master. Harry then goes and tricks Lucius into grabbing the book and saying how he gave it to Jenny during that time in Diagon Alley. He then gives the book to Dobby, and it's revealed that there is a sock within the book. And according to House Elf law, that once you've given up item of clothing, you are now free. Angry and about to use a spell that will become huge in later film installments, Dobby then saves Lucius and he walks away. And Dobby and Harry leave on good terms. We end the film with everyone in the Great Hall having a great dinner. Everyone that's been petrified has been cured, and Hermione comes in and just hugs Harry. And just as she's about to go and hug Ron, Ron's about to hug her. They then stop at the last minute and shake hands. Immediately, I knew that I can't wait for these two specifically for their character relationship to continue in future films. I just can't wait, because I know that that there's going to be that this is these two are definitely going to be a thing. I can't wait. We also find that Hagrid has also been released from Azkaban. Anyway, Hagrid has been released from Azkaban, and Dumbledore basically saying how everything's now alright, all schools' exams have been cancelled, courtesy of everything. I like how everyone's happy about it, but Hermione isn't, and of course, she of all characters would not. And and it's a little bit cheesy, but I like how Harry says, that the school, will not be the same without you. It's cheesy, it's silly, but I kind of like it, because honestly, this is kind of be the last time Harry, where these films will be lighthearted and funny and more kid-friendly, and that's where we end this movie. The Chamber of Secrets, most fans are kind of divided on it and find it just average. I love it. It is one of my personal favorites. Again, growing up, I really only watched the first two installments. The Philosopher's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets. I'll be honest, the Philosopher's Stone was a film I only grew to appreciate of it being the first film, but I can't really say I loved it. The second one, however, is a completely different story. I loved Harry Potter 2. It was my favorite one of the whole bunch. I think it managed to do what the first one did, but better. The CGI is far improved. The kids' acting is far improved. And the characters here, they came into their own this time around. And the acting just feels so authentic this time. And also, it opens up the world a bit. Again, in the first film, we found out that this world is magical, it's fantastical, there's action, excitement, adventure. But in this film, we find out that this world is not so perfect. There's a lot of dark in racism in this world. Something I thought we would never find in a kid's film, of all things. But it worked for this one, I believe. Again, the whole half-bloods and muggle-borns and mudbloods, that type of thing would carry on to later films. Also, certain bits in this film would have a huge impact in later films, such as Tom Diary's riddle being destroyed would have a huge ramification later in the films. And also, the confrontation more with Harry and not just Lucius Malfoy, but basically the rest of the Malfoy clan, especially with Draco, would be more hints of certain characters are going to play a much bigger role, and the characters will be further developed. I also think this is the best action-packed. A lot of the action in this film, for me, works. The suspense works. Out of the first two, this one just works so well. And another thing this film has that the first film, I think, didn't have, and even some of the other films, I kind of think, well, they didn't fail, but I think they didn't do as well, and that was a mystery. This is more of a mystery film, with a more classic murder-style mystery, although they don't get with an actual murder, but we get with people petrified. That's the closest this film ever got to seeing actual murders. And I loved that aspect of it. was more intriguing, and the answer and the reveal feels so good, so well executed, and again, this would impact later films. Now, again, people aren't a fan of Chamber of Secrets. For me, it's my absolute favorite of the films. And and I'll be honest, it's definitely either in top 4 or top 3, because again, as I'm reviewing this, I'm also rewatching the film before I go and do my review, so I can be refreshed and pick up stuff I didn't before. And again, a lot of that, and I think a lot of the groundwork for what the films would eventually build itself upon, I think came from the second film in the franchise rather than the first. But I would also say that what Chamber of Secrets also does, it ends the innocence of Harry Potter. For me, the next 2 films that followed opened up the world to be far more darker and grittier. Would open and would play, I think, in my opinion, a very huge impact on Harry's world not being colourful and lighthearted, but more dark and gritty. This film also has a bit of comedy, but I also like how it's used in certain moments and doesn't come out of nowhere or doesn't feel forced. It's really well done, and again, can't wait to see what more we see in Harry Potter. In the Harry Potter film franchise, Chamber of Secrets is my favourite. It's also very sad to find out that Richard Harris, who plays Dumbledore, which again is my definitive Dumbledore to me, sadly will not be continuing with the later films. Sadly, he passed away, and that kind of resulted in some things happening behind the scenes. There we have it. That was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I've already heard my thoughts. I thought it was a pretty fantastic film. I think it's better than the first one, and I think Christopher Columbus definitely stepped it up and made it work. Now, the film when it was released. Now, all Harry Potter films are successful at the box office. Critically, this one was pretty well received, but again, it also didn't do as well with the first one. It didn't flop, it didn't tank, but it didn't gross as much as the first one. And again, this film kind of has developed a bit of a bigger following and is being considered now the most underrated one of the franchise. And I think that is true. It is definitely underrated, and people should really give this film another look. This would also result in Christopher Columbus stepping down from directing this film, as he did not want to continue the Harry Potter film franchise with the unfortunate passing of Richard Harris, who tragically passed away. He felt he could not continue and decided to leave the series. As a result, for that, the filmmakers needed a new director, so they got director Alfonso Cuarón, probably butchering that name. And the next one in the installment of the Harry Potter franchise would be Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which we'll be looking at next time in the Harry Potter movie series review. But until next time, this has been the Stephen Hour, and ladies and gentlemen, have a magical day.